Legendary Pokemon are the most powerful beings in existence within the Pokemon universe, until they aren't. Unfortunately, Legendaries suffer from power creep just like every other Pokemon does. And the older Legendaries in the franchise have failed to keep up with modern metagames. Mewtwo, once the most powerful Pokemon in the entire game by far, is not even that common in Generation 9 Ubers, largely because it hasn't received that many buffs over the years. Its abilities are kind of useless. Mono Psychic typing isn't very good anymore, and more modern Legendaries just tend to be better. Even though Mewtwo has unfortunately not received any noteworthy buffs to keep it relevant in modern times, some Pokemon have. Sometimes these buffs are pretty small and don't make much of a difference, but sometimes they entirely redefine the Pokemon and keep them relevant competitively for years to come. Let's take a look at some of the most significant buffs for Legendaries in competitive Pokemon history. First up we have Lugia, the lesser of the Gen 2 box Legendaries in the eyes of many. Lugia has always lived in the shadow of its brother Ho-Oh, but this is a respectable legendary Pokemon itself. Lugia is famous for being one of the most powerful defensive legendaries ever made. This Pokemon's bulk is incredible, with 130 base defense and 154 special defense. The rest of its stats are also very well rounded, and it has an above average speed stat of 110 to top it off. In the early generations, a Psychic Flying typing was also decent defensively. There weren't that many Dark and Ghost type attacks running around, so the Psychic typing felt pretty good, giving you valuable resistances. And Flying typing is always good too, granting Spikes immunity and Ground immunity. It was in Gen 4 that Lugia first began to struggle in competitive Ubers. And this is not a bad Pokemon in Gen 4 Ubers by any means, but the cracks are starting to form here. Lugia's ability Pressure is useful, but not fantastic. The Psychic Flying typing is starting to catch up to Lugia as Ghost and Dark type attacks become more common from Gen 4 onwards. And Stealth Rock weakness is also a big detriment for this unfortunate legendary. Perhaps for this reason, in the very next generation, Lugia received an astronomical buff with its all-new hidden ability, Multiscale. Multiscale is an incredible ability that fits very well on this Pokemon. Thanks to Multiscale, Lugia will take halved incoming damage from attacks if it is at full HP. This powerful new ability made Lugia's defensive prowess even more pronounced. And it was a good Pokemon at taking advantage of this ability. With high speed and recover, you could very easily bring yourself back to that full HP threshold to stomach almost any incoming hit, whether super effective or not. The rock weakness is still a problem for you, because Stealth Rock will break the multi-scale effect, bringing you lower than full HP. But on defensive teams that can afford to play it slow, remove hazards to enable Lugia, that's not as much of a problem. Without this buff, I think that Lugia would not have remained viable in Gen 5 Ubers. With only Pressure as an ability, this Pokemon's shortcomings would have just been too much to overcome, but Multiscale really breathed some new life into Lugia, at least for a time. Unfortunately, in the modern day, even with the powerful Multiscale ability and even the all-new item Heavy Duty Boots to finally patch up Lugia's rock weakness, this Pokemon is really struggling to see use. Psychic Flying typing is even worse in the modern gens, with Knockoff being perhaps the best attack in the game, and many powerful Ghost and Dark types rising to the top of every competitive tier. Lunala is also a Gen 7 legendary that also has an ability identical to Multiscale, Shadow Shield, so that doesn't help Lugia stand out when another Pokemon can do something similar and is more powerful offensively. But I would still say that this is one of the most buffed legendaries ever, because if it was not for Multiscale in Gen 5, it would have been a lot worse for Lugia. It would have fallen off a cliff drastically. Multiscale at least gave it some reason to keep existing, some reason to be used. So I think that's noteworthy. And it was a very big buff. Up next is Zekrom, the cover legendary of Pokemon White version, and a Pokemon that did not have a fantastic start to its competitive journey. Despite being the all-new box legendary of Generation 5, it wasn't the best in its debut game. It was viable, but The legendaries that came before it were still running things, while Zekrom was more of a niche mixed attacker. This is an interesting Pokemon. It's a dragon electric type with very good mixed attacking stats, pretty well balanced stats overall, and a usable 90 speed. It also has a solid move pool. Bolt Strike is a great physical attack for electric types. Draco Meteor, excellent mixed coverage, and Focus Blast for the steel types that might give you trouble, and other such things. But none of this was enough to keep Zekrom relevant. In the following generation, Zekrom fell off a cliff in its viability. Almost never used competitively in Gen 6 or 7 Ubers, as all of its tools were just not good enough. It matched up terribly against top-tier Pokemon like Primal Groudon and Arceus Ground. So in Generation 8, years after this guy's release, they decided to finally throw him a bone, finally give this guy something. A reason to wake up in the morning. Zekrom received the new option of Dragon Dance, and this simple new moveset addition changed everything for Zekrom. Before this, Zekrom's only good boosting move was Honed Claws, which was really unexciting. It boosts attack and accuracy. Dragon Dance is significantly better. It's one of the premier boosting moves in the whole game, boosting attack and speed. It's a sweeping option. It's a win condition for teams. And with Dragon Dance, Zekrom can actually overcome one of its greatest drawbacks, its low speed, and outrun most of the metagame after a single boost. With 150 base attack and a good physical move pool, and even a mixed move pool if you need to hit the physical walls, Zekrom thrived. It was actually a very popular and very viable Pokemon in Gen 8 Ubers. All from one simple moveset change. Sometimes one move can make a world of a difference. Dragon Dance was the most significant buff, but Zekrom also received the move Scale Shot in Gen 8, which was another very good new option. This is a multi-hit move. It hits 2 to 5 times with 25 power on each hit. And after you use it, you lose 1 stage of defense, but you gain 1 stage of speed. Having this option that is able to deal dragon physical damage while also boosting your speed can be great on a mixed attacking set. Because after 1 Scale Shot speed boost, you outrun so much more of the metagame and you become so much more of a problem for the enemy. Having access to Scale Shot was also great news when Gen 9 rolled around and the new Loaded Dice item released. Loaded Dice is a new item that makes these multi-hit moves hit at least 4 times, which greatly improves the consistent damage output of Scale Shot and makes it a much more desirable option. While Zekrom is not as good in the Gen 9 metagame as it was in Gen 8, it's at least much more worth using now that it has these options than it would have been without them. The buffs were massive for Zekrom, and I'm sure that we'll see this rise to viability again in a future Ubers format. It has great tools, and it's much more functional as a physical attacking legendary as a result of these buffs. Up next is Ho-Oh, the other box legendary from Gen 2, the brother of Lugia. And these two brothers have a similar story. Because early Gen Ho-Oh is a great Pokemon, good defenses, good damage output, some nice options like Calm Mind, but the writing was really on the wall for Ho-Oh when Gen 4 rolled around, and Stealth Rock weakness was even more of a problem for Ho-Oh than it was for Lugia. Ho-Oh is a Fire Flying type, it's taking half of its entire HP from Stealth Rock. Something needed to change in Gen 5, just like it did for Lugia with the multi-scale buff. And Ho-Oh received a much better buff than Lugia did. This might be one of the biggest buffs a legendary Pokemon has ever received in the history of the series, because Ho-Oh received the new ability Regenerator. This ability is truly next level powerful. Every single time you switch out of the field, your Pokemon will restore 1/3 of their maximum HP. It is the safest way to heal in the entire game because you can heal without staying on the field and putting yourself in harm's way. You switch out and back in a couple times and you're all the way back to full. And this is on a Pokemon with incredible defensive stats. This guy also has 154 special defense, respectable defense too of base 90. I mean, usually Pokemon with Regenerator have low stats to balance out the fact that they have such a powerful ability. Think of, Amoonguss and Ordino. But Ho-Oh is an incredible Pokemon to receive such an elite ability. Unlike Lugia, whose ability buff did not carry it to modern relevance, Ho-Oh receiving Regenerator was such an enormous buff that the ripple effects of it are still felt today, as Ho-Oh is one of the most powerful defensive Pokemon, even in Gen 9 Ubers. I have a whole video dedicated to Ho-Oh and how it has survived power creep against all odds throughout the years. This buff happened a while ago, but this was enough to keep Ho-Oh relevant for so many years down the line. I'm pretty sure Ho-Oh will always be viable, to be honest, because these stats with Regenerator is just that powerful. Up next, we have a Pokemon that probably didn't need to be buffed at all. This is a rare Pokemon that actually was surviving power creep without needing to be buffed, but they went and did it anyway. I'm talking, of course, about Arceus. Arceus is one of the most successful Pokemon ever in Ubers, ever since it came out. Because of its sheer versatility, Arceus can be any type it wants thanks to its ability multi-type. All you have to do is hold the corresponding plate item and Arceus will become that type. Arceus's move pool is absurdly vast, with everything from physical attacks to special attacks to utility. Arceus can do anything you want. It can be a win condition offensive sweeper, it can be a utility Pokemon, and anything in between. It also has 120 in all of its stats, meaning it can be EV'd in any way you want it to. So Arceus did not need a buff to remain viable. This is just a foundation for excellence, as it can adapt to any metagame ever with all of its incredible options. But they decided for some reason to buff Arceus anyway. The rich really do get richer. And the Arceus buffs were pretty massive. There are actually a bunch of new moveset options Arceus got, like Body Press and Stored Power. But the most noteworthy of all was also Dragon Dance, just like Zekrom. They gave Arceus Dragon Dance too. A boost that it didn't have previously. It did have Swords Dance, but Dragon Dance is an incredible alternative that in particular turns Arceus Ground into an extremely frightening boost sweeper. After a Dragon Dance, Arceus Ground is easily outrunning the whole format, and it has Stab Earthquake, Stone Edge for complementary coverage, and guess what? Arceus got a great new utility move to make this set even more effective. Taunt. Arceus did not have Taunt before. Now it has Taunt, and it can actually counter one of the few ways to reasonably stop Arceus in the past. Status, or Whirlwind, or Roar. Taunt, of course, prevents the enemy from using any non-attacking move for 3 turns. So if they're trying to roar you out, deleting your boost, they try to burn you, halving your attack, or toxic you just to weigh you down, they can't anymore, because Arceus can just taunt them. So Arceus shot up in viability even more than it has in past Ubers formats. Arceus is better than ever in Gen 9, and it's not just a defensive response to other things or a calm mind threat that you got to set up for. It is the guy you need to check for. You need to check for Arceus Ground or you're going to lose instantly. It is the overwhelming offensive Pokemon, instead of being a response to it like it usually is. And finally, a Pokemon buffed so significantly that ripple effects of this are still felt throughout time itself. The buffing of Kyurem. Kyurem released all the way back in Generation 5, where it was not a very successful legendary Pokemon competitively. In fact, this guy's not even ranked OU. Kyurem is a Dragon Ice type, which is kind of rough. Ice typing is always worried about those Stealth Rocks. It does seem pretty good. It's got high attack, special attack, and HP. Well-rounded stats overall, but it is an awkward Pokemon to use, with limited options in Gen 5. The vulnerability to Stealth Rock and its fairly low speed compared to other threats in the tier give it a hard time. Kyurem would fall even further than this in later games as Dragon typing became worse, with the introduction of Fairy in Gen 6. Kyurem is ranked RUBL in the Gen 6 and 7 video games, which is rather pathetic, isn't it? But then something happened in Generation 8, and Kyurem went from one of the most laughable legendaries in the series to an uber-level threat in just one generation. What the hell changed? What did they do? What buffs did this receive to jump up so significantly? One of the new additions to Kyurem's moveset was the option Freeze Dry, a new attack that is Ice-type with 70 power, but unlike most Ice-type attacks, instead of water resisting the hit, Freeze Dry is super effective against Water-type Pokemon. This is an amazing move, even though it's a little bit lower in the base power department than Ice Beam. Erasing one of your resistances and being super effective against it instead is massive. Water types are a common answer to Ice types. This turns the tables on that completely and makes Kyurem much more difficult to switch in against reliably. This turned Choice Specs Kyurem into a very effective wall breaker that was overwhelming to deal with. But that was not all that Kyurem received. As a buff, Kyurem also received Dragon Dance and the new physical stab option of Icicle Spear. Kyurem was primarily used as a special attacker for most of its existence, but Dragon Dance in the moveset finally allowed it to take advantage of that significant attack stat. It's got 130 attack, it's easy to forget. Its physical move pool was also limited in the past, but Icicle Spear is a solidly viable option for Ice Stab. It is a bit unreliable with the 2 to 5 hits, but hey, it's something. And you could run Dragon Dance mixed attacking sets with Kyurem as a result of this, with Icicle Spear for physical damage, Freeze Dry for special damage, and Earth Power for coverage. The fact that Kyurem could now use its other offensive stat reasonably well made it more difficult to deal with, because you don't know what kind of Kyurem you're going to be up against unless it does something. Maybe you go to a special wall and they Dragon Dance in your face and they hit you with a massive Icicle Spear. But if you go to a physical wall, you're getting Freeze Dried on your Slowbro or something, Earth Powered on a Steel type. It's extremely tough. It's extremely tough. So these buffs were enough to push Kyurem from irrelevance to ban-worthy status, and it got banned in Generation 8. In Gen 9, Kyurem also almost got banned. There was a suspect vote that initially came through as positive to ban Kyurem. They later found out that the vote was rigged. That's a whole thing. I have a video about that if you're curious. But Kyurem was very close to getting banned again, and a lot of people still want this guy gone because all of its excellent tools it had in Gen 8 are still here. Even though the metagame around it is a little bit more equipped to handle it than Gen 8 was, this guy is still tough to deal with. With its combination of mixed attacking and physical attacking sets, it can also greatly use Terra Blast to gain physical coverage it didn't have previously, to fill that gap. And Loaded Dice makes Icicle Spear a much better option too. That's worth considering. And the thing about Kyurem is that Kyurem is a Pokemon with multiple forms. So the other Kyurem forms also received these buffs, these new moveset options. This didn't change much for Kyurem White form. It's not like this guy is aching to use Dragon Dance or Icicle Spear. It can though, but Kyurem Black, on the other hand, the very physical attack leaning form, also shot up significantly in viability upon receiving these incredible new physical attacking options. Kyurem Black is another interesting one, because back in Gen 5, this guy was also ranked below Ubers. It was an OU Pokemon. Even though it's got an incredibly high attack stat of 170, its physical attacking move pool is very limited. It basically only has Dragon type attacks, which are fairly reasonable to switch in against. It has no physical ice attacks except for Freeze Shock, which is a charge move that's very telegraphed. So Kyurem Black was fine, and in Gen 6 it got even worse because Fairy types came into existence, and Kyurem Black relies mostly on Dragon type attacks for damage. But Kyurem Black benefited from the addition of Dragon Dance and Icicle Spear even more than base Kyurem did. Kyurem Black's main drawback for years was its lack of good physical stab moves to take advantage of its high attack, but now it not only had Icicle Spear, it has Dragon Dance. It also helps that Kyurem Black's ability is Terra Volt, which has the same effect as Mold Breaker. It ignores enemy abilities. That means it's a Dragon Dance sweeper that is not worried about Unaware. Unaware is usually a hard counter to boost sweepers like this, but Kyurem Black ignores this completely. The other great physical attack that Kyurem Black does have access to that I've neglected to mention so far is Fusion Bolt, or Bolt Strike, which it borrows from Zekrom's moveset. These are electric type attacks, and this is incredibly complementary alongside Icicle Spear for the Bolt Beam combo. And Dragon Dance Kyurem Black is one of the most frightening physical threats you can face. Out of all of these Pokemon, I think Kyurem and its Kyurem Black form are the most buffed out of all of these. Just because of how significant the step up was. They went from some of the worst legendaries in the series, limited by their lack of options, to finally receiving the options they always wanted and immediately thriving as a result, reaching new heights they never could have imagined before. Many of these legendary buffs feel random, and some attempts to buff legendaries are unsuccessful. Mewtwo's new ability in Gen 5 was Unnerve, an ability that prevents the enemy from eating berries. This is one of the most unexciting buffs a Pokemon has ever seen. In fact, Pressure is often better than Unnerve. Ho-Oh's buff, on the other hand, was astronomical, turning it into one of the most powerful Pokemon in the series. I do believe that Zekrom and Kyurem deserved buffs, but I do hope that in the future they give buffs to more legendaries that have fallen off, that need some sort of boost to keep up. I'm hoping they buff the Gen 4 legendaries, Palkia, Dialga, and Giratina. And I hope they don't buff Arceus even more. I'm a fan of Arceus, but was buffing Arceus really necessary? One of the most powerful Pokemon ever? It's like buffing Groudon Primal. I mean, it's just unnecessary. What do you think though, folks? Do you think that Mega Rayquaza needs to come back and receive a new buff in the next game? You reckon they need to buff Zacian Crown back to how it was? Let me know what you think down below in the comments. And thank you for watching.